For productivity workloads and things like Twitch streaming, video editing, photo editing, or coding, many people recommend getting a secondary monitor to improve productivity. So I recently managed to acquire a crappy old cheapo second monitor to go alongside my current normal 1080p monitor, which is an Acer G237HL, which I reviewed here. And is it actually worth it, or are dual monitors kind of pointless? Now, firstly, why would you want a dual monitor setup in the first place? Well, it promises, better productivity because you can have more things on the screen at one go. And because of the extra pixels and extra real estate, you can have more apps, more things displayed, you can have more settings, you can have more information, and that allows you to do whatever you're doing more efficiently, with more productivity and quicker. And apparently that's good. Well, it is. But is that actually true? Does having a second monitor actually do that? Well, let's talk about setting up a secondary monitor first. So setting up a secondary monitor is actually pretty easy. Get your secondary monitor, put it on the table beside your main monitor, plug in the necessary required cables. There'll be one power cable and one display cable. Usually that's about it, unless you're fancy and have USB 3. That should be all. And go to display settings, which is accessed by right clicking your home desktop screen if you're using Windows. If you're using Mac, I actually don't know, so I can help you there. And all you have to do is ensure that you set the first the right monitor. If your main monitor is on the right side, you set it as monitor 1, and your secondary monitor is set as monitor 2. And you can click on monitor 2 and check that everything on the profile is correct and set appropriately. Check that the resolution is the correct one, the orientation is correct, and make sure that it's extend, because if you duplicate these displays, both displays will show the same thing, and that makes it rather pointless to do the multi-display setup. And that's about it. That's all you have to do to kind of set up your secondary monitor. So how is a dual monitor setup actually like? I've got it set up right here with Premiere Pro software, just to showcase what a usual workflow is like. I've got my program monitor here, so this monitor is dedicated to showing the actual clip right here, and this is source monitor. This is my project files, and if I want to, I can switch to effects here and have effect controls in a separate panel and still be able to view the project that I'm working on, which is pretty awesome. And this is just roughly how I use Premiere Pro now that I have all this extra real estate. And what are the benefits to this? Well, you can look at the video more clearly because it's a bigger surface, but because it's a crappy cheapo monitor, I can actually do color grading on this one because the color calibration is completely off. It's terrible. But it's good enough for previews, which is fine. And because the screen is moved here, I can move and expand this timeline quite a bit more because these two panels are less important. I don't need to be able to preview it here, so I can expand this timeline, and that means I can see a lot more layers at one go. And say if I do expand each layer and make it wider, bigger, thicker, that is also possible because of the bigger screen. So when I expand that timeline, it allows me to have a lot more flexibility, and I can have a lot more precise cuts because it's easier to zoom in and get the scrubbing tool perfectly in the right spot, which is very helpful, very useful indeed for doing video editing, obviously. And that is pretty dope. Another thing I would do usually is I would have, if I'm typing out scripts, doing schoolwork, video and editing photos or whatever, I would be able to put Spotify here and have my Google Drive here, and I could type out documents on this side while this side is playing music. I can see what's the next song, which is a bit of a nice trick, pretty awesome indeed. I can play games here. I have my Counter-Strike, and if I'm streaming, which I rarely do because it's not very interesting for me, I can actually see the chat. Or maybe if I'm streaming and if I'm playing games and playing music at the same time, or if I'm playing games and having a Discord chat at the same time, I can actually view what's happening on the chat live because I have a secondary monitor, which is an awesome thing. There are some cons, however. I realized that when I'm video editing, my body is pivoted towards the center of the monitor, which isn't too ergonomic. I'm turning left and right. That's not the most comfortable thing in the world. It does get a bit tiring, but if you move the second monitor so that they are aligned, and if both monitors are the same model and they kind of fit properly, then it's actually pretty okay. But right now with this kind of setup, it's kind of janky. It kind of sucks because I have to tilt around, and that is uncomfortable to do. Another thing I noticed is that sometimes I feel like this monitor does get underutilized, because if I'm not doing video editing, I'm not playing music, and I don't need the second monitor. This monitor is just there showing nothing at all. So that may make the purchase less worth it, because it's maybe you won't use it. Maybe it's unlikely that you will use the second monitor. So that's something to take note. That is indeed an important con. And of course, monitors are not cheap. This is a crappy one. This is an old, terrible one. But I recommend you get a good, proper one if you're serious about a dual monitor setup. One that at least matches the quality of your first monitor. But if you're unsure about all of this, I think the best course of action is to get one of these cheap, crappy monitors. Test out whether you enjoy a dual monitor setup or you want an ultra wide instead. And that way you can test it out without spending too much money. Go and get an old monitor, maybe pull it off one of your mates. If it's free, just take it, plunk it down, see how it works. If you enjoy having the extra real estate, you think you can't live without it, go and get a proper monitor to match your original one and have a good, proper experience. But if it's cheap and it turns out you don't care about a second monitor, you realize it's underutilized, then who cares? Stick to your single monitor setup. Nobody's gonna hate on that. Single monitor setups are cool, they look clean, they're awesome, but secondary monitor setups are pretty useful in terms of pure functionality. So if you're a pro, the answer of whether you should get a dual monitor setup is yes. If you are not pro, you're not living off video editing or coding or I don't know, right? Or things that need multiple screens, then my answer is a clear maybe. Test it out for yourself through some cheap methods and decide that way. Do not jump to conclusions, throw a few $100 at a secondary monitor and find out you don't use it much at all, and then you have to sell it. Simple conclusion, I guess that's it for this video. If you liked this video or enjoyed it, definitely like and subscribe. That'd be greatly appreciated. If you want to follow me on Twitter, on Instagram, I do follow back, linked down below in the description or comment section. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.